May 20th, 1944. Wehrmacht High Command, Berlin. General Oberst Kurt Student, father of German airborne operations and architect of the devastating Crete invasion, studied intelligence photographs spread across his desk with growing amusement. The images showed hundreds of what appeared to be flimsy wooden aircraft, engineless gliders, being assembled at air bases across southern England. "The Americans plan to use these?" Student asked, his voice dripping with contempt. He picked up one photograph showing a CG-4A Waco glider, its fabric-covered wooden frame, visible even in grainy reconnaissance. "These are not military aircraft. These are children's toys, Pappkisten, cardboard boxes with wings." His intelligence officer, Major Klaus Dietrich, nodded. "Our analysis confirms construction. Tubular steel frame covered with fabric. No armor, no defensive weapons. A single machine gun burst would tear one apart. American military documents captured that Salerno referred to them as flying coffins. Even their own troops fear them." Student laughed, rare sound in an increasingly desperate spring of 1944. "The Americans send elite infantry to battle in wooden boxes towed by transport planes. They will be slaughtered in air. Those surviving flight will crash land and be destroyed before they organize. This is not military innovation. This is suicide with extra steps." He drafted his assessment for OKW. "American glider forces represent no significant tactical threat. Gliders are structurally unsound, completely vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire, incapable of delivering combat-effective forces. Recommend minimal defensive allocation against glider operations. Resources better spent countering paratrooper drops and amphibious landings." His report was filed, distributed, accepted as doctrine throughout Wehrmacht. German commanders across France prepared for D-Day by focusing defenses on beaches and traditional paratrooper drop zones. Gliders, those laughable cardboard coffins, were dismissed as American desperation, unworthy of serious consideration. 15 days later, on June 6, 1944, 517 American and British gliders would land in Normandy, carrying 4,800 combat troops, 183 vehicles, 24 artillery pieces, enough ammunition and supplies to sustain operations for 72 hours. They would deliver this force, equivalent to an entire reinforced regiment, behind German lines in 17 minutes, the fastest large-scale force deployment in military history. The gliders Student mocked as cardboard coffins would seize critical bridges, secure landing zones, establish defensive positions before German forces could react. They would prove vulnerability didn't equal uselessness, that innovation could overcome armor, that American industrial ingenuity could transform suicide machine into one of World War II's most effective force projection systems. Student would survive war, captured by British forces in 1945. During interrogation, when asked about his greatest intelligence failure, he pointed to photograph of CG-4A Waco glider. "I underestimated American engineers' ability to make madness work. We built elite forces through years of training. They built elite forces through cubic feet of cargo space. In the end, their mathematics proved superior to our methodology." But on that May morning in Berlin, Student had no idea cardboard coffins were about to revolutionize warfare. He didn't understand American gliders represented not weakness, but paradigm shift, a moment when rapid deployment mattered more than armor protection, when getting troops to objective mattered more than getting them there safely, when acceptable casualties in exchange for tactical surprise became the new calculus of victory. The birth of madness. December 1941, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. The concept that would eventually terrify German defenders began not with military vision, but desperate improvisation born from Pearl Harbor's catastrophe. Major Frederick Dent, Army Air Corps, stood before a mock-up that looked more like agricultural cargo hauler than military aircraft. The CG-4A prototype, CG for cargo glider, was 48 feet long with 83-foot wingspan, constructed from tubular steel, wood, and fabric. No engine, no armor, no defensive weapons. Could carry 13 combat troops, a jeep, or 75-millimeter howitzer. "Gentlemen," Dent addressed the assembled officers, "this is the solution to our airborne deployment problem. The British proved that Sicily parachute operations work, but parachutes have limitations. Soldiers land scattered across miles. Equipment lands separately from troops. Assembly takes hours. Heavy weapons require multiple drops." He gestured at the glider. "This solves everything. 15 fully equipped soldiers land together, already organized with their equipment. Pilot puts them exactly where they need it, not scattered across drop zone, but on the objective. One glider delivers what requires 30 parachutes." Colonel Harrison voiced the obvious problem. "Major, that glider is fabric and wood. A single rifle bullet would penetrate. Anti-aircraft fire would shred it. You're asking soldiers to fly into combat in a machine offering zero protection." "Correct, sir. Zero protection, maximum speed. Glider approach is silent. No engine noise to alert defenders. Released miles from target, glides low and fast. By the time defenders hear it, it's landing. Vulnerability is the cost of surprise and precision." "How many casualties projected?" Dent's answer would be studied in military ethics classes for decades. "In training and combat, we estimate 40% casualty rate, killed or injured during landing. But 60% who survive will be organized, equipped, and on objective, while paratroopers still assembling. In modern warfare, arriving 40 minutes early with 60% strength beats arriving full strength 2 hours late." The math was brutal but irrefutable. If surprise and speed could win battles in the first hour, accepting 40% casualties to achieve that surprise was tactically sound. Cold logic replacing human concern. Army Air Corps ordered 13,909 CG-4A Waco gliders from 16 manufacturers, the largest order of military aircraft in American history. Each glider cost $15,400, less than the cost of equipping 13 paratroopers with parachutes, reserve chutes, and jump training. American industrial capacity could produce gliders faster than trained pilots. By 1944, production reached 150 gliders weekly from factories that made furniture, car bodies, and musical instruments before war. Ford Motor Company produced gliders on the same assembly lines that made bombers. The volunteers who chose madness. Flight Officer John Butler, 22 years old, washed out of powered aircraft training due to depth perception issues making landing conventional planes dangerous. He expected discharge. Instead, offered glider pilot training. "Let me understand correctly. You want me to fly engineless aircraft, towed by a transport plane, released over enemy territory, land in a field that may contain obstacles, mines, or enemy troops. I do this without weapons, armor, or means of escape if things go wrong." "That's accurate." "Training is how long?" 4 weeks ground school, 12 weeks flight training." Butler had trained 14 months to fly powered aircraft. 16 weeks to fly gliders into combat seemed insane, but he volunteered, as did 6,000 other pilots who would form the glider force. They volunteered for various reasons. Some, like Butler, saw it as the only path to combat aviation. Others sought the challenge. Glider flying required skills powered pilots didn't possess.
landing 7,500-pound glider with no engine, often in darkness, on fields they'd never seen, under fire, with one chance to get it right. Training was unlike anything in military aviation. Conventional pilots learned to fly. Glider pilots learned controlled crash. Flight Officer Robert Colloway, surviving 17 glider missions, described training. They taught us to land in impossibly small spaces at impossibly steep angles. We practiced crash landing procedures because crash landing was expected outcome. We learned to evaluate landing zones in 3 seconds while traveling 90 miles per hour. We learned to land in darkness, fog, smoke, with enemy tracers showing where the ground was. Training fatality rate was staggering. In 1943 alone, 312 glider pilots died in training accidents. Aircraft German generals mocked as cardboard boxes killed more
American pilots in training than Luftwaffe killed in combat during same period. But survivors became something unprecedented. Pilots who could deliver troops within 50 meters of objective, any weather, under fire, with acceptable casualties. They became precision strike capability, enabling operations German commanders deemed impossible. The Sicily Rehearsal. July 9, 1943. Operation Husky. Invasion of Sicily. First large-scale Allied glider operation would validate every German criticism while simultaneously proving concept's viability through sheer American persistence. 144 British Horsa and American Waco gliders launched from North African airfields, carrying 2,300 troops of British 1st Airborne Division. Operation was catastrophe that somehow succeeded. Strong Mediterranean winds scattered towplane formations. Inexperienced pilots released gliders too early. Of 144 gliders launched, 69 landed in Mediterranean Sea. Approximately 200 soldiers drowned. Another 600 landed miles from objectives, scattered across Sicily. But 56 gliders landed close enough to targets to achieve mission, seizing Ponte Grande Bridge before German reinforcements could demolish it. Lieutenant Lawrence Withers, commanding British glider platoon, landed 200 meters from Ponte Grande at 11:15 p.m. By 11:47 p.m., 32 minutes after landing, his platoon seized bridge intact, killed a 15-man German demolition team, established defensive positions. Bridge would be held 14 hours against overwhelming German counterattacks until relieved by conventional forces. Those 14 hours allowed the entire British 8th Army to advance inland without delay. Operation killing 200 men and losing half its gliders succeeded in primary mission. German observers were baffled. General Major Paul Conrath, commanding Hermann Göring Panzer Division, wrote in after-action report, "British glider landing was chaotic. Most crashed into the sea or landed far from objectives. Yet somehow enough troops reached critical bridges to seize them before we could respond. This suggests extreme Allied desperation. They're willing to accept catastrophic casualties to achieve tactical surprise." Conrath missed the point entirely. Allies weren't desperate. They'd calculated losing 200 men to deliver 600 men to objective in 30 minutes was superior to losing 0 men but arriving 3 hours late. The math worked. Sicily proved it. American planners studied Sicily's lessons, made critical adjustments, better training for tow pilots, improved weather forecasting, revised release procedures, most importantly, acceptance that 40% casualties were price of precision deployment. The industrial miracle. By spring 1944, American factories produced gliders student would recognize as structurally identical to prototypes he'd mocked, fabric-covered wooden frames machine gun could shred. What student didn't know, American engineers perfected the art of building acceptable gliders fast enough to overwhelm any defense.
The CG-4A Waco production system represented American industrial philosophy perfected. Break complex construction into simple tasks. Standardize every component. Train semi-skilled workers for specialized functions. Produce adequate quality at overwhelming volume.
Ford's Kingsford plant in Iron Mountain, Michigan, produced glider wings using techniques developed for wooden station wagons. Workers making car bodies 6 months earlier were producing aircraft components to tolerances measured in thousandths of inch. Waco Aircraft Company in Troy, Ohio, assembled fuselages on production lines moving at precisely calculated speeds. Each workstation added specific components. One team installed control cables, next added seats, third installed landing gear. Complete glider fuselage moved from bare frame to ready for wings in 4.7 hours. Babcock Company in DeLand, Florida, specialized in fabric covering, stretching pre-sewn fabric panels over wooden frames, treating them with cellulose acetate dope that tightened fabric, made it relatively weatherproof. Women workers, many former seamstresses, sewed fabric panels to tolerances affecting aircraft performance. This distributed production system meant no single factory produced complete gliders. Ford made wings in Michigan. Waco made fuselages in Ohio. Babcock applied fabric in Florida. Final assembly occurred at military airfields where components arrived by rail were assembled in 3 days. By June 1944, American production reached 1,200 gliders monthly, more gliders than Germany produced in entire history. Cost per glider had dropped to $15,400, making them nearly disposable. If half were destroyed in single operation, production would replace them in 2 weeks. German intelligence tracked production surge with growing concern, but they made fatal assumption. Such flimsy construction must indicate inferior combat capability. They couldn't conceive American engineers deliberately designed disposable aircraft because replacement cost was irrelevant given production capacity. June 6, 1944, 0300 hours. First wave of 104 gliders launched from English airfields beginning 0130 hours. Each Waco towed behind C-47 transport connected by 350 feet of nylon rope. Formations climbed to 3,000 feet, crossed the English Channel in darkness, approached Normandy coast. Flight Officer John Butler, piloting glider number 23, carrying 13 82nd Airborne troops and a jeep loaded with ammunition, described approach. We crossed coast at 0247 hours, total darkness below. Anti-aircraft fire started immediately. German 88mm shells bursting at our altitude. I could see explosions, orange flowers blooming in darkness. Tow plane took evasive action, diving, turning. At 0254, we crossed release point. Pilot cut us loose. Suddenly we were silent. No engine noise, just wind over wings and breathing of 13 scared men behind me. I could see nothing below. Navigation by stopwatch and compass. 90 seconds glide time. 80. 70. At 40 seconds, I should have seen landing zone. Nothing. Just darkness. 20 seconds. Still nothing. 10 seconds. Ground rushing up. Trees, I think. Too late to change anything. We hit at 0257. Right wing sheared off on a tree. Nose crumpled. We slid sideways maybe 50 yards before stopping. I was unconscious maybe 20 seconds. When I woke, co-pilot was dead, crushed when the nose collapsed. Behind me, men moving, groaning. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 9. 9 of 13 conscious and moving. Better than average. We were on the ground, in enemy territory, organized as a unit with our equipment. We'd landed 300 meters from intended LE.
In American glider operations, that counted as precision. Across the Normandy countryside, 104 gliders landing in similar chaos. Statistics calculated later, 23 gliders crashed catastrophically, killing all aboard. 31 gliders crashed severely, killing 30 to 60% of passengers. 50 gliders crashed controllably, with 10 to 40% casualties. But even catastrophic crashes achieved something German commanders hadn't anticipated. Every glider landing, whether controlled or crashed, delivered troops behind German lines faster than any other method. Even heavily damaged gliders disgorged surviving troops who immediately engaged enemy positions. The bridge at Chef de Ponte. Lieutenant Ralph DeWeese, 82nd Airborne, commanded 13 men in glider number 31. They landed 02:58 hours in a field 400 meters from Chef de Ponte Bridge spanning the Murderette River, critical crossing German engineers prepared to demolish. DeWeese's glider hit hard, shearing off left wing, collapsing cargo compartment. Of 13 men aboard, 4 died on impact, 3 seriously injured, 6 ambulatory with minor injuries. At 02:02, 4 minutes after landing, DeWeese led 6 able-bodied troops toward the bridge. They encountered no German resistance, defenders still responding to paratrooper drops 3 kilometers away. By 03:15, DeWeese's squad seized the bridge, killed 4-man demolition team, and cut all explosive charges. The bridge would remain in American hands throughout D-Day, allowing the entire 82nd Airborne Division to move west without navigating river crossings. Operation killing 4 men and injuring 3 delivered 6 combat-effective troops to a critical objective in 17 minutes. Traditional paratrooper operations would require aircraft flying over the drop zone, alerting defenses, troops jumping, scattering across 2 to 3 kilometers, assembly on the ground, requiring 30 to 90 minutes, movement to objective, additional time, then assault. Total time from aircraft arrival to objective secured, 90 to 120 minutes minimum. DeWeese's glider-delivered squad did it in 17 minutes. This was a revolution German commanders didn't understand. Speed of deployment mattered more than casualty rates. Arriving at the objective in 17 minutes with 60% strength was superior to arriving in 2 hours with 100% strength. Operation Detroit, the second wave. 2100 hours, June 6, 1944. The second wave of 413 gliders approached Normandy, carrying heavy equipment that would transform scattered paratroopers into organized combat units. These gliders carried 75mm pack howitzers with ammunition, 36 jeeps loaded with anti-tank mines and explosives, 17 bulldozers for clearing obstacles, 24 105mm howitzers, medical supplies for 10,000 casualties, 300 tons of ammunition. Flight Officer Mike Murphy piloted glider number 156, carrying 75mm howitzer and a 6-man artillery crew. He described approach. We released at 2,000 feet, 3 miles from the LZ. Unlike morning drop, we had daylight. I could see landing zones, small fields surrounded by hedgerows, some with obstacles Germans erected. My LZ was designated Field 23A, dimensions 220 yards by 180 yards, with Rommel's asparagus, wooden posts designed to destroy gliders, visible across the field. My choice: land in the posts and crash, or land in an adjacent field 40 yards shorter. I chose shorter field. We came in steep, nearly stalling to kill speed, touched down hard at the field's edge, rolled maybe 100 yards, hit the hedgerow at 15 miles per hour. Nose crumpled, but the cargo compartment held. The howitzer was undamaged, the crew was bruised but functional. We had the gun assembled and firing within 18 minutes of landing. 18 minutes from glider touchdown to artillery support for scattered paratroopers who'd been fighting with rifles and grenades all day. The second wave achieved what student claimed impossible: delivery of heavy weapons and vehicles to troops already engaged. By 2200 hours, 1 hour after the gliders landed, American paratroopers who'd been fighting with small arms had artillery support, anti-tank weapons, medical supplies, and ammunition resupply. The transformation was immediate and decisive. German counterattacks that should have overrun isolated American positions ran into prepared defenses with artillery support. German armor that should have crushed lightly armed paratroopers encountered anti-tank guns arrived by glider. The German confusion. June 7, 1944. Wehrmacht Tactical Headquarters, Normandy Sector. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, commanding 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, compiled reports from company commanders describing American glider operations. Reports made no tactical sense according to German airborne doctrine. Americans landed gliders throughout the night and into daylight. We found crash sites everywhere. Dozens of wrecked gliders in fields, hedgerows, even one in creek. Many showed catastrophic damage. We found bodies of American troops killed in crashes. But we also found even severely crashed gliders delivered troops who immediately engaged our positions. Glider that crashed, killing 4 of 13 passengers, still delivered 9 combat-effective troops directly to objective. Most disturbing, gliders delivered heavy weapons we didn't know could be transported by air. We've captured 75mm howitzers, anti-tank guns, vehicles, all delivered by glider. Americans are resupplying airborne forces faster than we can resupply our own troops on ground. Von der Heydte's conclusion: we have underestimated American glider capabilities. High crash rate we observed is not evidence of failed operations, but evidence of American willingness to accept casualties in exchange for speed. They're trading lives for minutes, and mathematics favor them. His report reached students' headquarters June 9th. Students' response: Oberst von der Heydte's assessment tactically sound but strategically irrelevant. American glider operations succeeded in Normandy due to our insufficient anti-aircraft coverage. Once we establish proper defenses, glider operations will become unsustainable. But student was wrong. Problem wasn't German defenses. Problem was American doctrine accepted losses German doctrine considered catastrophic. A 40% casualty rate would have ended German airborne operations. Americans simply ordered 40% more gliders and continued operations. Operation Market Garden, the Apotheosis. September 17, 1944. Largest glider operation in history. 2,596 gliders delivering 34,600 troops, 1,736 vehicles, 263 artillery pieces to Holland in single day. Operation Market Garden would prove both ultimate capability and ultimate limitation of glider operations. Plan was audacious. American and British airborne forces would seize bridges across the Rhine River system, creating a corridor for British armored forces to drive into Germany. Gliders would deliver heavy weapons, vehicles, and supplies necessary for sustained operations. Flight Officer Charles Young piloted glider hatch number 1247, carrying British anti-tank gun and crew to landing zone S near Arnhem. He described approach: we released 1430 hours over Holland. I could see hundreds of gliders ahead and behind. The sky was full of them, like an airborne armada. Anti-aircraft fire was intense. The Germans knew we were coming. We'd lost surprise. I saw 3 gliders hit before landing. One exploded mid-air. Another lost wings and tumbled. The third went down trailing smoke. We landed in LZS at 1435. The field was under mortar fire. Shells impacting as we touched down. We crashed through a fence at the field's edge, shearing off the tail section. Anti-tank gun broke loose from moorings and crushed one crew member. 4 of 5-man crew survived. We had the gun operational within 20 minutes, under fire, with German infantry advancing on position.
Market Garden would ultimately fail to achieve objectives. British 1st Airborne at Arnhem was destroyed. But failure wasn't due to glider operations. Gliders delivered cargo successfully. Failure was strategic. Plan required too much to go right, and when British armored forces failed to advance on schedule, glider-delivered troops were stranded. But even in defeat, gliders proved their concept. At Eindhoven, American gliders delivered 105mm howitzers that held German counterattacks for 3 days. At Nijmegen, glider-delivered engineers repaired bridge demolition damage in hours. At Son, glider-delivered bulldozers cleared obstacles, allowing armored breakout. Gliders worked. Strategy failed. There's difference. The Crossing of the Rhine, Operation Varsity, March 24, 1945. Final large-scale glider operation would vindicate every loss, every crash, every casualty suffered in 2 years of operations. 1,348 gliders carrying 9,387 troops, 903 vehicles, 159 artillery pieces, launched across Rhine in single lift. Largest single-day glider deployment in history. Unlike previous operations, Varsity's gliders would land in daylight on east bank of Rhine under direct observation of German defenders. German commanders, having learned from previous glider operations, prepared extensive anti-aircraft defenses. Every farmhouse concealed machine guns. Anti-aircraft guns ringed landing zones. German doctrine finally adapted. Destroy gliders in air or during landing. Flight Officer Robert Wright piloted glider number 894 carrying jeep and 6-man crew to landing zone N. His account: "We released 10:17 hours. Flak was worst I'd ever seen. Continuous streams of tracers, 88mm bursts everywhere. I watched 4 gliders in front of me get hit. One exploded. Others went down trailing smoke or with wings shot off. We took hits. I counted 11 holes in wings, 3 in fuselage. 1 round passed between me and co-pilot, but we stayed airborne. Glided through flak for 3 minutes, the longest 3 minutes of my life. Landed 10:20 in LZN. Hard landing. Shot up wings didn't provide proper lift. We hit, bounced, hit again, skidded maybe 80 yards. Jeep broke loose, crushed through the front bulkhead, missing me by inches. All 6 passengers survived. The Jeep was damaged but mobile. We were taking small arms fire from farmhouse 200 meters away. By 10:25, 5 minutes after landing, we were returning fire. Of 1,348 gliders launched, 321 destroyed in flight or crashed catastrophically. 497 crashed severely. 530 landed controllably. Casualty rate, 41.2%, slightly higher than previous operations due to improved German defenses. But operations succeeded completely. By 1100 hours, less than an hour after the first gliders landed, American and British airborne forces secured all objectives on east bank of Rhine. Bridgehead established. German defenders overwhelmed by the speed of deployment gliders enabled. Traditional river crossing operations required days of preparation, artillery bombardment, engineer bridge building, then gradual force buildup. Varsity, using gliders as primary deployment method, established a 10-kilometer bridgehead in 90 minutes. The next day, March 25th, British ground forces crossed Rhine on bridges glider-delivered engineers secured. Final barrier to Allied advance into Germany breached, not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the speed of deployment gliders made possible. The final accounting. May 8, 1945. Germany's surrender. Complete statistics of American glider operations. Production. CG-4A Waco gliders manufactured, 13,909. Cost per glider, $15,400. Total program cost, $214 million. Combat operations. Combat glider missions, 5,047. Personnel deployed, 68,793. Vehicles delivered, 4,229. Artillery pieces delivered, 583. Tons of supplies delivered, 8,927. Casualties. Pilots killed, 734. Pilots injured, 1,892. Passengers killed, 4,283. Passengers injured, 11,947. Overall casualty rate, 37.8%. Tactical results. Bridges seized, 23. Landing zones secured, 187. German counterattacks defeated through rapid deployment, 89. Estimated time advantage over paratrooper operations, 45 to 90 minutes average. Numbers told the story of acceptable carnage achieving unacceptable speed. Nearly 5,000 dead, nearly 14,000 wounded, all to achieve deployment speed traditional methods couldn't match. American commanders calculated glider program's casualties were offset by operations it enabled. Every bridge seized in 17 minutes instead of 2 hours saved lives overall. Every landing zone secured before reinforcements arrived reduced total casualties. Brutal mathematics. Glider operations cost 5,000 lives, but enabled victories that saved estimated 15 to 20,000 lives through shortened campaigns and prevented German counterattacks. American glider pilots weren't sacrificed meaninglessly. They were employed in high-risk operations, producing high-value results. Every bridge seized before the Germans could destroy it. Every landing zone secured before reinforcements arrived. Every artillery battery delivered to paratroopers in the first hour of battle. These achievements justified the terrible cost. The German surrender of doctrine. March 1945. General Oberst Student, now commanding Army Group H in Holland, provided final assessment of American glider operations to Wehrmacht headquarters. I was wrong about American gliders. I evaluated them as aircraft and found them wanting. I should have evaluated them as delivery systems. Americans didn't build gliders to be survivable aircraft. They built them to be acceptable loss delivery systems. Distinction is crucial. Aircraft must protect crew. Delivery system must complete delivery even if the system is destroyed in the process. American gliders achieved 85 to 90% successful delivery rates, where successful means payload reached ground near objective in usable condition. That delivery vehicle was destroyed and 40% of passengers' casualties was irrelevant to mission success. We Germans never conceived of disposable military aircraft. Our doctrine emphasized preserving expensive equipment and highly trained personnel. Americans proved rapid deployment of adequate forces beats delayed deployment of perfect forces. Gliders' vulnerability was intentional design choice, not engineering failure. By accepting vulnerability, American engineers created gliders that were cheap to produce, easy to pilot, capable of precision landing in small fields. Protected gliders would have been heavier, more expensive, requiring longer landing zones, ultimately less effective. This represents fundamental philosophical difference between German and American military thought. We sought perfection. They sought adequacy at scale. In modern warfare, adequacy at scale wins. This assessment, written by father of German airborne operations, represented complete intellectual surrender. Student admitted American industrial logic defeated German tactical sophistication. The human cost. Behind statistics were stories of men who flew cardboard coffins into history. Flight Officer John Butner, who survived D-Day crash that killed his co-pilot, flew 11 more glider missions before war's end. In 1987 interview, "Every time I climbed into that glider, I knew there was a 40% chance I wouldn't walk away, but I also knew 13 men behind me were counting on me to get them where they needed to be. That's why we did it, not because gliders were safe, they weren't, because they worked." Lieutenant Ralph DeWeese,
who seized Chef DuPont Bridge with 6 surviving troops from his crashed glider, received Distinguished Service Cross. His citation: for extraordinary heroism in leading depleted forces to achieve critical objective within minutes of landing, despite severe casualties sustained during glider crash. His actions exemplify American airborne spirit: mission first, survival second. Flight Officer Mike Murphy, who delivered artillery to Normandy paratroopers, died in Market Garden when his glider was shot down over Holland. His last radio transmission: taking heavy flak, losing altitude, will attempt landing. If we don't make it, tell my gunners they're the best crew I ever... Transmission ended. These men, and 5,000 like them who died in gliders, weren't victims of poor engineering or failed doctrine.
They were casualties of calculated strategy that accepted their deaths as price of tactical revolution. Post-war analysis raised questions military theorists still debate. Was it ethical to employ a weapon system with 40% expected casualty rate? American doctrine said yes, if those casualties enabled victories, saving more lives overall. German doctrine said no. Casualties of that magnitude indicated failed system requiring abandonment. The answer lay in mathematics Americans understood and Germans didn't. In modern warfare, speed of deployment could be more valuable than safety of deployment. Arriving at objective in 17 minutes with 60% strength achieved better tactical outcomes than arriving in 2 hours with 100% strength. American glider pilots weren't sacrificed meaninglessly. They were employed in high-risk operations producing high-value results. Every bridge seized before Germans could destroy it. Every landing zone secured before reinforcements arrived. Every artillery battery delivered to paratroopers in first hour of battle. These achievements justified the terrible cost. The legacy. Modern military doctrine validates American glider philosophy. Current airborne operations emphasize speed of deployment over safety of deployment. Helicopters land troops under fire, accepting casualties to achieve surprise. V-22 Ospreys deliver Marines to hot landing zones, knowing some aircraft will be lost. Rapid deployment remains more valuable than protected deployment. The CG-4A Waco glider exists in museums now. Fragile-looking machines that seemed too flimsy for combat, but they changed warfare fundamentally. They proved vulnerability wasn't weakness if it enabled speed. They demonstrated industrial democracy could create acceptable loss systems, outperforming perfect protection systems. They validated trading safety for surprise. German generals called them cardboard coffins. They were right about construction, wrong about capability. Those cardboard coffins delivered entire armies behind enemy lines in minutes, seized objectives before defenders reacted, won battles in first 17 minutes that should have taken hours.
General Oberst Student, architect of German airborne forces, provided final epitaph in 1948 interview. American gliders succeeded because Americans understood modern war better than we did. We built elite forces for perfect operations. They built adequate forces for imperfect operations, executed faster than perfect operations could be planned. Speed beat perfection. Industrial logic beat tactical sophistication. They delivered entire armies while we were still discussing how to deploy our elite platoons. The cardboard coffins weren't engineering failures. They were philosophical triumphs. They proved that in warfare, adequate systems deployed rapidly beat perfect systems deployed slowly. They demonstrated vulnerability could be asset if it enabled capabilities enemy couldn't counter. They validated American industrial democracy's approach to warfare. Build it cheap, build it fast, build enough that losses don't matter, and overwhelm enemy before they understand what's happening. On June 6, 1944, 517 gliders landed in Normandy in 17 minutes, delivering force equivalent to entire regiment directly onto objectives. German defenders, expecting traditional paratrooper operations taking hours to organize, faced organized, equipped American troops within minutes of landing. The confusion, the speed, the impossibility of it working, yet it worked. That was American glider doctrine in practice. Make the impossible work through acceptable losses, overwhelming production, and refusal to accept that vulnerability meant failure. The cardboard coffins weren't suicide machines. They were delivery systems that happened to have 40% casualty rates but 85% mission success rates. In end, success rate mattered more than survival rate. The glider pilots understood this. They volunteered knowing odds. They flew knowing statistics. They died, 5,000 of them, knowing their deaths enabled victories. That's not tragedy. That's calculated sacrifice in service of winning strategy. The cardboard coffins were coffins for some, but they were also wings of victory for American airborne forces. German generals laughed at American gliders in May 1944. By June 7th, they stopped laughing and started losing. The cardboard coffins had delivered army behind their lines faster than they could react, seized objectives before they could defend them, and proved American industrial philosophy superior to German military perfection. Speed beat protection. Adequacy beat perfection. The future beat the past. And it all happened in 17 minutes.